She is a professor of English at the School of Humanities and Social Sciences from IIT Indore. She also serves as a chair of the Jayaprakash Narayan National Center of Excellence in the Humanities. As a pioneering scholar, Dr. Menon has led the Digital Humanities and Publishing Research Group at IIT Indore, and she has also made remarkable contributions to post-colonial studies, digital humanities, and scholarly publishing as well. So her influential monographs include the migrant identities of Creole cosmopolitans and remapping the post-colonial canon. She has also co-edited landmark volumes, including India's first multilingual collection of e-literature published in 2023. Dr. Menon's scholarship extends to major digital cultural heritage projects and the open access platform KSHIP, which has transformed the landscape of knowledge accessibility. She has been awarded prestigious national and international fellowships, grants, and awards, affirming her stature as a global academic leader as well. So, as a vice president of CenterNet, she has placed Indian digital humanities on the global map, further consolidating her impact on the field. So, currently, she is working on her forthcoming monograph, Decolonizing Knowledge Infrastructures. So, with her vision and scholarship and pioneering initiatives on digital humanities, she still continues to inspire scholars to help them to reshape the academic landscape. So we are truly honored to have her with us today. So let me welcome you all. And let me welcome you, ma'am, for this International FDP. And I hope your knowledge will enrich our audience who are from research background. So my best wishes for you, ma'am, and welcome once again. And I welcome all the participants as well. Thank you. And now it's over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abhirami, for that very generous introduction. So I was thinking, like,
this meeting is being recorded.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We have started to record.
Yeah, no problem. So I am thinking that, this is more of an introduction to digital humanities. And so I'm going to phrase my talk accordingly. I was also, I will talk for maybe about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then, I can take questions. And I think it would be better if I can take more questions and, so feel free to put your questions in the chat or send it to Abhirami. I don't know what your process is, and I am happy to answer any questions. What I would like to share is kind of our journey in digital humanities. And I think, hopefully that will help some of you to think about that as a discipline. And as Abhirami said, I'm Professor Nirmala, by the way, and I started off being a traditional post-colonial literature scholar. Yeah. And from there to being a digital humanities student and scholar has been a journey that has taught me a few lessons. Let's put it like that, right? And it involves a lot of learning, but it also involves a lot of unlearning. And I will share a few of those pointers with you today. Abhirami, can I share a screen? Okay, I think you are on mute.
I have made you as a co-host, ma'am, so you can
Okay.
start.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. And is it full screen? Now it must be. Is the screen moving? Slides are moving?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah. So, so like I said, that is how I started. I started as a... Can you hear me? Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We could
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah, No, because I thought I heard someone speak. I started my journey after my PhD in post-colonial studies, and my work in post-colonial studies culminated in my second book and first monograph called Remapping the Post-Colonial Canon. I, some of the questions that I raised in that text uh, related to the post-colonial theoretical vocabulary. When we think about the meta-narratives or the post-colonial theoretical vocabulary, I found that when I was reading texts that were not written in English and that were written in some regional languages like Kannada or Malayalam or Bengali, some of the theoretical frameworks did not really apply well to those terms. So my first book was really a theoretical exploration and a theoretical discourse about the limitations of the technical vocabulary of postcolonial studies. And I was making the case that while the theoretical frameworks and the conceptual frameworks that we have thought about are not inaccurate, they are certainly incomplete. Uh, and they are incomplete because on they were mostly based on readings from Indian writings or post-colonial writings in English. Right? Now, this is true for not just India, but it is also true for the African subcontinent, where you have literature that is produced and consumed in multiple languages. So, what happens to the theoretical vocabulary when you are looking at it from the lens of some literatures that were not written in English? Right? Now, in that process, without really thinking about it or without really thinking of myself as a digital humanist, one of the one of my methodologies in one of the chapters was to look at scholarship in post-colonial studies across 3 or 4 databases, right? And I found that Indian post-colonial studies discourse, was available across, say, about, at the time, this was 2010 2012, at the time I found about 3000 plus articles that were about post-colonial literature from India, right? So I looked at post-colonial literature, then I looked at post-colonial literature in from India, from South Asia, and kind of looking at the granular data, right? And then from the data that I got about post-colonial literature from India, uh, I found that almost 80% of those articles were based on 3 texts, right? 3 authors, Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh, and Arundhati Roy. Right? Wonderful authors. I'm a big fan of all 3 of them. But most of the theoretical vocabulary came from close readings of just 3 authors, right? Compare that with, the number of authors and the number of writers and the number of books that were produced in India at the time, and there was a huge disparity, right? So that was my theoretical argument. So when I moved to India, and I was at the time teaching at a university in the United States, when I moved to India and I moved into an IIT, one of the things that kind of kept coming back to me is that it was fine to make that theoretical argument, right, about multilingual scholarship. It was great to make it, to kind of think about why is it that our conceptual metaphors are so limiting, but how do I actually make a difference in that? And that is where the idea of a project came to mind. And and I say it very simply only because, to let you all know, that is how I started working and thinking about digital humanities as a serious way of intellectual deliberation and intellectual activity. Uh, and that is how I kind of, in 2014, we established the first digital humanities research lab in India at IIT Indore. And that research lab was just me and four of my PhD students. And we had a small kind of, I think about 200 or 200 square feet of space. And outside that, we printed Digital Humanities Lab on an A4 paper and just stuck it there. And that name has stuck, so now, we are the Digital Humanities Lab. That is how simple my beginning in this discipline was, right? Just thinking about questions, thinking about data, and thinking that, that data can actually give me some answers to certain questions. And digital humanities looking at data seem to be a way of doing it. So that is how I look at it. Now, having come a long way, having run the lab for 10 years, and also having a center for digital humanities. We have the JP Narayan National Center for Excellence in the Humanities, and you can look up the JPN Center, jpnnationalcenter.com, or go to our LinkedIn page, JPN Center. You'll find the website there. You will find the kind of projects that we do and what kind of projects that we support. So that has been a long journey. So that is how I think about digital humanities even today. I don't think that you have to use technology, or that you have. I think that if the fundamental questions that you want to address or question uh, in your research, and that research can be done better with with the lens of technology, or by either using technology, critiquing technology, or talking back to technology, uh, uh, I think you should do it. And that to me seems to be the basis of doing digital humanities. The other point that I want to make is that as humanities scholars, our mandate has always been to critique, to question, to hold accountability, from various sources. And if we do not understand at least a little bit, because most of those kind of conversations and those kind of events are happening on digital platforms, as humanities scholars, I think it is imperative for us to understand a little bit of how those platforms work, so that we can still kind of fulfill the mandate of being a humanities scholar. It also means that it keeps us relevant, right? Yeah. So that's what my kind of introduction or introductory spiel. Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've always been interested in is, knowledge infrastructures. What are knowledge infrastructures? And it goes back to my earlier interest, in, multilingual scholarship. But now my interest has turned to multilingual scholarship production, right? When you think about scholarship in literature, in other disciplines, most of the scholarship that we produce is in English. So are there ways in which we think about multilinguality with respect to scholarly production, with respect to scholarship? So I go back to Charu Singh, who writes Science in the Vernacular, Translation, Terminology, and Lexicography in the Hindi Scientific Glossary, 1906. How has modern science translated into these languages and made available for vernacular publics? Any analysis of these publics, their stratifications and sensibilities, demands far more attention to how science was in practice translated. Science pedagogy in Indian education, even in the early 21st century, continues to be beset with the problem of how scientific terms, concepts, and theories are to be learnt in Hindi, or for that matter, in any of the vernaculars. For vernacular scientific publics to emerge, or for their robust presence in public life, vernacular terms had to be devised. An important case studies of the vernacularization of modern science in colonial Bengal, Projit Mukherjee has reasoned that the creative adaptation of new knowledge in a new historical context demands its cultural, ideological, and material translation beyond the relatively simple process of linguistic translation. Right. So, the question for me as a digital humanities person is that if the Hindi scientific glossary in 1906 was developed, and there were scientists and scholars sitting down to see how science can be made articulate and accessible to people who, would primarily get their education in Hindi or in Bengali. Yeah. What happened since 1906? Why did we not really kind of push the boundaries of looking at multilingual scholarship, right? And I think the time has come for us to address that question and to see what is it that we can do to fulfill those gaps. Now, it turns out that my uh, so, okay, now it's fine, Uh, so that is one of my recent very important interests in digital humanities, is to look at digital infrastructures, developing digital infrastructures to facilitate multilingual scholarship and to facilitate the kind of digital humanities projects that my colleagues across the country might be interested in, because they would most likely not be monolingual. They would most likely be multilingual. They would be people wanting to, digitize or annotate works in Bengali, in Sindhi, in, different languages. And what are some of those projects, and what is the infrastructure that we have available, and what are the infrastructures that we need to build? So if you look at DH problems in the Indian context, these are some of the things that I would list. One, we still need OCR software capable of digitizing printed Indic texts with high levels of accuracy. It has become much, much better now, and we do have OCR software for certainly some languages, like, say, Malayalam, Bengali, and Hindi, where the accuracy levels are, touching 90%, which is good. But even then, the accuracy levels for uh, for English is currently at 98 and 99. So I think, we still have some ways to go, but in some languages we are getting there. But in other languages, we still have a much longer way, where where we have OCR software that have accuracy levels of 70 and 75%. So we need to kind of, fix that gap. Hi. Electronic literature, digital projects, digitization, and archiving. I will talk a little bit about the electronic literature part later. Yeah. Diverse computation-based projects. There is now I think there is a consensus, though, we started off not having a consensus over the use of the word digital humanities, but now I think institutionally, infrastructurally, as well as, with funding agencies, the term digital humanities is now very much, understood as a discipline and understood as an emerging area of pedagogy as well as research. Right. Multilingual pedagogy, research and projects, interoperability of infrastructures for archiving and repositories, need for a deliberation on open access. So, we think about diamond open access, and what does it mean to develop an open access publishing ecosystem, and what are the things that we need to do as a country to ensure that our faculty and our researchers across this country have access, both, have access to availability of articles, as well as access to, publishing them. Recently, many of you will know, we have ONOS, that is One Nation, One Subscription, that was negotiated. And for the next 3 years, at least those of you who are in public universities will get access to articles published over, I think in about 6,000 journals for free. Right. And I think they're going to they plan to expand that to private universities also in the next second phase of it. Right. So that is an investment, and that's an investment we have all, that we have consciously made, which is a good thing. And that investment also allows for, paying APC charges for faculty whose papers are accepted in high value journals. That's a short-term solution. What is a long-term solution, right? So very recently, I think I just got the reply yesterday that we have published a paper in a Wiley journal about ONOS and its possible consequences, possible strengths, as well as, how we need to look forward in terms of what should we do as a long-term solution for our scholarly publishing needs in Indian academia. So open access is one way of thinking about it. Diamond open access. How much of that is feasible? Can we? I am more interested in coming up with sustainable models of publishing, right? That can be sustainable for the average researcher and the average student, research scholar across our universities and our departments. So that is also one area where I think, um, mm, uh, you know, I'm sorry for that phone call. So I would like to take you through some of the projects that we have done, that we are currently doing. So this is actually my very first, and you will see in the picture there, the right hand side, used to be the logo of the DH lab. We now have a new logo, and clearly I've not updated it yet, but this is mapping Indian literature scholarship. I show this example as one of the first ideas that we had in the DH lab, but one that is still on a pause mode. It is still not like, public. It is still not right. Unlike some of our other projects that are up and running, this one is still not gotten up, like, and made public. We are hoping to do that at sometime soon. But this was a database for scholarship in Indian languages and literatures. So what we have done is, now we have some web-based kind of, citation sites where, people have collated scholarship. So we are hoping now to reach out to them and create a complete anthology. Right. So this was a very simple project and came from my first question that I told you about from my book, which is how do you access scholarship in Indian languages and literatures? So when we thought of this in 2015, at the time, most of the Indian language literatures and their scholarship was in print form. Very few of them had digital access. And, there was no way to kind of access them. There was no discoverability, right? So we collected and put together about 2,000 citations, and we took literature as an example, or literature as a sample study or case study, uh, because literature is one area in which there is a robust creative as well as, scholarly production uh, in different languages in India, right? And so we looked at that as an example. So we created a database. We have a database. It is a pilot database, and we want to make it public. And it was a very simple thing. We had the citation of the scholarly article in the original language it was written in, and we had a translation of that in English, and we had a small 100-word abstract in English, right? So all three, an abstract in English. So, it was very simple. So just kind of listing it in an Excel sheet and then kind of making it public in a database. That was it, right? And we started off with Malayalam, Bengali, Northeast language, and Sindhi. And this selection was just very random, partly because my students were in those were people who were familiar with those languages. So we just picked languages that we can all vet and kind of moderate and see whether it is accurate or not. So languages that 3 4 of us or 5 of us were comfortable with, right? So that is a kind of a project in process, right? uh, Now, the second project is the Indian Electronic Literature Anthology, right? So how do we in the lab think about a project? As you will see, the journey of an article or a project, we were thinking about, Indian electronic literature, wondering whether, we found that ELO, the Electronic Literature Organization, had volume 1, 2, and 3 published, and none of them seemed to have a single entry from India. So we wondered why that is the case, right? Does it mean that India does not do electronic literature? And it seemed odd given that we are a very literary culture, uh, why did none of, so what we really found then, as you can see in this slide, we looked at different issues. We looked at, like, first and second waves of Indian electronic literature, locating new literary practices in Indian digital spaces, infrastructure and social interaction, situated research practices. We looked at, functioning process of embedded paratext of digital literature, techno icon of literary digital poetry. So what we found is that, there is electronic literature in India. It was being done in different languages, and it was being communicated and circulated within communities of uh, poets or writers, right? It was not really disseminated. So what Dr. Shanmugapriya, she's now a faculty member, and me did was, she was a PhD student at the time, is we brought out a volume. We kind of, took out a volume for, hello, hello, yes, yeah, this is her. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes. No, I've filled the form yesterday. No, I did yesterday. Yes, I will. No, I don't know Anima Johari, but I have replied. I'm Nirmala Menon. No, I'll reply. I'll reply. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. That was something I had to take. Mhm. Uh, so, what we did was, we kind of tried to find, we realized that there is no anthology. There is production, there is no anthology. So we decided to publish it ourselves. And so we took out a call for Indian Electronic Literature Volume 1. Now Volume 2 is under production, just for your information. And I think in the next 2 weeks, in fact, the second volume of Electronic Literature Anthology Volume 2 will be out. And I'm very, very happy about it, because, we learned a lot while building the Indian Electronic Literature Anthology Volume 1 about the process. And this was done on a platform called Knowledge Sharing in Publishing, KSHIP, which is hosted by IIT Indore and the DH Lab at IIT Indore. And the Indian Electronic Literature volume was the first publication from that platform. Now, the second volume is there. We realized certain infrastructure limitations that we had when we were publishing the first volume, which you will see a change in the interface in the second volume. And I really encourage all of you to look out for volume 2, which should be out in the next 2 weeks. Right? So this is how we go about developing a project and then kind of implementing the project in our lab. And this is an example of a successful project that we have, that we have completed. And like I said, not just volume 1, volume 2 is also ready to be released, right? So we do a lot of research. We kind of, try to understand what the gap is. We try to kind of, fill that gap. And then we kind of translate, like if you see all those articles, translate what we understand from our research into a project, and in this case, a product. Right. So this is another project which we are currently doing, and this is a DST supported project about Sindhi digitization of rare historic Sindhi books into audiobooks. Right. Now, this project was done, is a PhD project for one of my students, and both of us are working on it. This was done because my student, who also happens to come from a Sindhi background, found that there are rare Sindhi manuscripts that were published post-partition. Right? And these manuscripts were in a Perso-Arabic script. Whereas the second and the third generations of Sindhis in India do not have or any knowledge or access to that script, because many of them who crossed over after partition took to started using the Devanagari script. So while some of them or many of them are familiar with the language, they're not familiar with the script. Whereas these were very important, partition narratives or partition texts that were often written in rehabilitation camps immediately after partition. And so we thought that, how do we make this accessible to the next generation? And what we did was, we created a project, and now DST is supporting that project. We have already kind of, recorded about 20 to 25 books. We have another 75 to go. We identified 100 books, we are doing this in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Sindhology in Kutch, Gandhidham. And with them, we are creating an audio archive of these books. So you will be able to actually listen to the books rather than, read them because of the inaccessibility of the script. So we had to identify readers who were able to access the script and were able to read it well. And now we are going to create an audio archive. And that is a project that is well underway. And because, like I said, funding is a big thing in all of these issues, right? The first project is still stalled because we have not yet gotten the funding for that exact project, right? Whereas in this one is funded. And so we are in the process of finishing it. Mostly in the next 1 year, you will see we are actually now creating the platform where this is going to be an archive or a repository. And it's an amazing, I think it's going to be an amazing project. I'm very, very happy and very proud of this project and of my student. Uh, so this is another project so that we are thinking. So that is an audio archive. The other one was like a database or a scholarly. All of this, as you can see, is linked to not just scholarship, but also linked in some ways to infrastructure and digital infrastructure for humanities research in India. Right. So this is our methodology for doing this project. Indexing and archiving at SHIP with IIT Indore, which is our platform, as I told you. And, the archival collection will, as I said, it starts off with 100 books, which we are committed to doing. And we hope to be able to expand that probably with, crowdsourcing and with help from people who will access the collection. And I know that a lot of people in the community are very excited about this project, right? So these are some examples of projects that all of you can take a look at. Now, I want to point you to two projects here. One is the one on the left top corner, the project Madurai, and the second is the one just below it, which is Bichitra, which is an online Tagore Verorium. These are two projects that precede the time of digital humanities scholarship as we know it, right? Where, people who did these projects did not call themselves digital humanists. Uh, but it also suggests that the trajectory of digital humanities in India is a more diverse trajectory. Right. Bichitra was developed at Jadavpur University with a group of academics and scholars. It's an amazing project. Please check it out. Whereas Project Madurai was a group of independent researchers who were interested and kind of thought that this needs to be preserved. And so they kind of developed that project. Both of them have since moved to Unicode and have used latest technologies, and they're still available. So please check them out. So what that means is that, is also true of digital humanities in India today, that it is happening in exciting ways in academic spaces, but also in non-academic spaces and in independent spaces. And some examples I will give you is PARI, People's Archive of Rural India, which is a great website. Please check that one out. It's a great project. Swatantra Malayalam Computing, which also I invite you to check out, because it does a lot of work in terms of fonts, in terms of developing fonts for Malayalam. And it is also a project done by an independent researcher, independent scholar, who is actually an engineer, and he does this on the side because he loves to do that. So all of these are examples of different kinds of digital humanities projects happening across India, and the kind of infrastructures that we are developing to be able to accommodate these kind of diverse projects. So I'm interested in now. I have done small projects, of course, and I'm still continue to do them. But now I'm also interested in creating those kind of macro infrastructures, like a public knowledge project, if some of you are familiar with that, or a Daria EU project, which kind of serves as infrastructure for varied projects across Europe. And I would like to see India be able to do something like that. And I hope, at some point we will be. So this is what I want to. This is a book that we recently published. It's edited by Maya and myself. It's called, Practices of Digital Humanities in India: Learning by Doing. Uh, Learning by Doing is a collection of digital humanities projects from India. This is really important because these are documenting projects that um, were incubated in India, struggled with resources, constraints, and were able to get their project live. So these are examples of very inspiring projects. Uh, and I think the reason we wanted to put this together was both intellectual and pedagogical. That if we have to have digital humanities courses across across the country, and if we also want to have students understand digital humanities in the Indian context, we needed to have a book that would actually help people understand projects that were born and conceptualized and implemented within our context and our resources. So this book actually does that. The other one, which I don't have a slide for, is a course on Swayam, which you can all check out. It is called Introduction to Digital Humanities. Again, coming from this book, but taught by Maya and me. And we have about 6 or 7, I think 8 modules or 12 modules with various aspects of digital humanities. The course is free. So please, go and you can do it at your own pace. It doesn't have to follow a semester model. So you can listen to those, listen to those lectures. And so please do that and let us know, because, if you give us feedback on what you think would be more useful to you, what could be included, we are happy to kind of do a version or a second course that could fill those gaps. So please, check that out. Next time I'll promise to have a slide that gives you the, gives you the link to that course. But right now you can go to Swayam and search for, digital humanities, Maya Dodd and Nirmala Menon, and you should get it. Yeah. So finally, from the canon to the code, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I think, what all of this suggests is that, there is platforms, there is websites, there are digital projects that many of our students, our faculty, our researchers want to think about. I think all of that means that we need a reconceptualization of the design of the indexes of the web, reimagine the possibilities of platform democracy and ownership of archival material, data, and metadata, and in some way rethink the meaning of the word location and sites of digital curation and dissemination. This means a reimagining of the technical possibilities of text, context, paratext, and language in a way that shifts our abilities to design an ethical publishing infrastructure. So I think infrastructure for me is a key word these days, and that is why you are getting that too. I'm beginning to think about digital humanities in many very infrastructural ways. But I think we also need to understand that, we are a country which is always moving between the analog and the digital. And while digital humanities should be about a lot of things, it should not be about exclusion and about marginalizing, groups or communities or people who are already on the margins. So our digital humanities also has to be inclusive. So let us find kind of radical or, innovative ways of pushing the boundaries of what we think about as digital humanities. So I have been approached by presses to write a book on the theoretical vocabulary of digital humanities. And I have often, I've not yet said yes to that, because I think that, digital humanities theoretical vocabulary will emerge from all the diverse projects that all of us are doing in different parts of the country. And when we have that language, maybe I will write that, and or maybe someone else will write it, or one of you will write it. But I did not want to rush into theoretical metaphors before we kind of, see what kind of projects emerge from our interests, from our context, from our languages. And then maybe, when we develop a theoretical vocabulary, it will be more inclusive. It will kind of, take into account the disparate ways in which, say, a bhashini will work for Tamil or Malayalam versus how it might work for Sindhi or a northeastern language, right? How are our infrastructures serving those languages? Because I'm a language scholar, and because I think about language and literature all of the time, my examples will all often be from those spaces. But I think that is how we need to think about digital humanities as we move forward. And I think, I should stop here and take questions. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Suggest research methodology textbooks for AI and DH researchers. So for DH, there are enough. You can just Google it. I have a few in my arm's length, which I can show you. I'm a series editor for Routledge Digital Scholarship Series. So this is a book that we came out with recently. See if you can see that. It's called the Routledge Companion to Libraries, Archives, and the Digital Humanities. So that is one that I can suggest to you. Another one is, the Routledge Companion to Transnational Web Archive series. This is also a very good book. This is a really good series that you should all kind of check out. It's called Global Debates in the Digital Humanities. And the Global Debates is a series of books, and it is, done by Matthew Gold. So it's by the University of Minnesota Press. So you will find a lot of, I think this Global Debates was their third or fourth in the series. So they have, 1, 2, and 3 also. So those will kind of give you an arc of, the history or trajectory of digital humanities research. And currently, there are many new books coming up. So, I have also been kind of adding things for my digital humanities class. So, what is the potential of virtual reality and augmented reality in literature and cultural studies? A good question. So, I think that has always been there, right? In literature and cultural studies, you would have, I think it is what you would call immersive literature, right? So if you have a work of literature or, a cultural studies project like an AR or VR immersion project, once you do the immersion project, then I think you would have to do the study on what does it mean to have a virtual or a immersive uh, tour of the stepwells of Delhi, for example. And I mentioned that particular one because, I think the AIIS has done a project on, stepwells in and around Delhi. And if you go to the AIIS office in Delhi, you can actually have a VR experience of, understanding that. Now you have that, right? So you have had that experience. And then you have your literature, right? You have literature that, talk about these stepwells and, talk about that. So maybe, one of the ways in which you would think about is like, does our more granular understanding of these stepwells through these VR modes also add any value to our reading of those texts? So that is one interdisciplinary way in which I would look at it, right? So that is just one example off of my head, but you can think of similar examples. Oh, absolutely. I think, where do you see digital literature in English? I think there's a lot of digital humanities programs now. And I think digital literature, if you mean creative literature, like I said, when we are compiling the second volume of, electronic literature from India, we find that now there is a lot of different experiments of digital literatures in India, both in English and in other languages. So I think you will see a lot more. And just like the film or the short film, there will be that one work that will push the boundaries of what it means to write digital literature. That has been true for almost every genre of literature. You see how climate fiction has changed from early 2000s to now, right? The kind of climate fiction that is coming out. So it's only a matter of time where you will see the same with digital literature.
If you have any more questions, please can you address it in the chat box? We have one
So,
more question.
transcribing written literature to audio literature. Uh, so here is the thing, right? Um, I think, and this is my view on translations also, having a translation is better than not having any access to a text, right? So if, most of us can learn or know only a certain finite number of languages, right? I can do 4, right? Some of you may be able to do 6 or 7. Uh, so at some point, if you are a person who is interested in literature, some of the work that you'll be interested in will be translations. So I think a good translation is wonderful, but good or bad or ugly, having a translation is better than having no translation, right? So at least you know that this is Russian literature, this is Polish literature, this is that, right? Uh, so I think it's the same thing for, audio literature. I think, a lot of times, a different generation, I know someone from my generation, I still like to read books. And sometimes I do read it on my iPad, but, for the most part, I like to read a book. But, subsequent generations may not read books. They may have other ways of consuming literature. So we as literature scholars it's incumbent on us to understand those new forms of consumption of literature too, right? And I think, that's what you learn that remember, the book itself is a technology. So before the book you had the scroll. So I think there would be very few people who would say that, we should not have the book. Right? So because now we have thought of the book is a very ubiquitous technology, it's a very stable technology, and we know that it will be there until someone puts it on fire. It is available to you, multiple copies are available. So all of those things makes it a very stable technology, and therefore a ubiquitous one. The digital literature is not at that stage where it is fully stable and certain, right? And I think, that it will get there. But the rise of the book as a technology is directly related to the rise of the novel as a genre. So similarly, you will see when the digital stabilizes, there will be forms that will kind of, stabilize. There will be forms that will be stabilized based on these new platforms that are available, right? So let's see where it goes. Yeah, I mean, like I said, AI is not something I feel very competent in commenting on, but definitely there should be, AI is going to change the way we do a lot of things. I still believe that, if AI can do some of the mundane things that we are all having to do, I'm okay with that. I don't think it still can do some of the creative things that people do, but let's see, I could be wrong. So, let's wait and watch. So if that is all, then okay.
Thank you for addressing all the queries that was posted in the chat box. This was an insightful session where we have enriched our knowledge And even just like DH360, you have touched upon all the concepts and theories that are involved in digital humanities. And I think
I
most
took
of
my
the
cue from the title that you put, right? So I said, okay,
uh,
let me do exactly that.
so you have given a 360 idea of what is TH and how we can know the concepts and theories that are going to. So thank you so much for giving
Thank
this
you.
knowledge